Pretend to be my girlfriend for tonight.
Imagine waking up one day and being offered everything you've ever desperately needed. Every debt paid, the best medical care for someone you love, financial security you've only dreamed about. But there's one condition, one impossible rule. You cannot fall in love, and if you do, if your heart betrays you, you lose everything, every single thing. This is the story of Hannah Collins and Dr. Benjamin Roth, a story about money and desperation, about walls built around broken hearts, and about the moment when two people had to choose between an impossible contract and an undeniable love. What Hannah didn't know yet was that this one night would lead to an impossible choice: lose her father or lose her heart. The Plaza Hotel, New York City, Saturday night. Hannah Collins stood in the corner of the ballroom, gripping her old purse like it was the only thing keeping her from drowning. Around her, women in designer gowns laughed and clinked champagne glasses that probably cost more than her rent. She didn't belong here. Everyone could see it. She could feel their eyes on her cheap Macy's dress, silently asking, who let her in? Hannah was a cardiac ICU nurse. She worked night shifts at Manhattan Presbyterian, saving lives while barely surviving herself. She'd only come tonight because her supervisor insisted. It was a charity gala for the hospital's 50th anniversary, and attendance was strongly encouraged. Now she regretted every second of that decision. Across the enormous ballroom, Dr. Benjamin Roth was trapped in his own personal hell. His mother, Vera Roth, a woman who wore her wealth like armor, was pointing at yet another suitable young woman from a suitable family. The fifth introduction that night. She's perfect, Benjamin, the Ashford family, old money. You need to settle down with someone appropriate, someone at our level. Benjamin's jaw tightened. For 2 years, since his disastrous divorce, his mother had been on this relentless campaign, arranging meetings, orchestrating introductions, treating him like a prize to be auctioned to the highest bidder. His ex-wife, Camilla, had written a best-selling book after their divorce. Heart of Ice, she'd called it, a memoir that painted him as a cold, emotionless monster, incapable of love. Most of it was lies, but lies told well enough become truth. The book had nearly destroyed his reputation. It took 18 months to rebuild what she'd torn down with her pretty words and manufactured tears. Never again, he'd promised himself. Never again would he let emotions, those unpredictable, dangerous variables, control his life. His eyes scanned the room, looking for any escape, any excuse to leave this conversation. And then he saw her, a young woman standing alone near the flowers. Dark hair falling in soft waves, simple dress, but it was her face that caught his attention, that expression of barely contained panic, of someone desperately wishing they could disappear. He recognized that look. He saw it in his own mirror every morning. Before he could look away, he saw a man approach her, Chad Whitmore, drunk, arrogant, heir to a real estate fortune, and a reputation for inappropriate behavior his family always paid to cover up. Benjamin watched as Chad looked the woman up and down with obvious contempt. "I don't think we've met. You must be with the catering staff, right? Could you bring me another scotch? Double, neat." The insult echoed through the immediate area. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The woman's face went pale, then flushed red. Her hands gripped her purse so hard, her knuckles turned white. She was about to run. Benjamin could see it. About to flee this horrible place with whatever dignity she had left. And in that moment, Benjamin Roth made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He excused himself from his mother mid-sentence and crossed the ballroom. People moved aside as he walked, that automatic deference wealth and power command. He stopped right beside the woman, close enough to smell her perfume, something floral and subtle, so different from the heavy designer scents saturating the air. He leaned in, his mouth inches from her ear, and whispered, "Pretend to be my girlfriend."
for tonight.
She turned sharply, eyes wide with shock. Up close, he could see they were brown, warm and intelligent despite the fear in them. "What?" "Play along. Trust me, I'll make it worth your while." Before she could protest, before her brain could catch up with the surreal moment, he took her hand, his fingers intertwined with hers. Warm, firm, deliberate. He turned to face his stunned mother and the growing crowd of curious onlookers. "Mother, I'd like you to finally meet my girlfriend, Hannah." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Chad's mouth fell open, his scotch glass frozen halfway to his lips. Vera Roth looked as if someone had slapped her. Her pearls trembled at her throat. Benjamin smiled, that devastating, charming smile that appeared on magazine covers and made hospital donations triple. He brought Hannah's hand to his lips and kissed her fingers, his green eyes never leaving hers. "Sweetheart, I believe they're playing our song. Dance with me." Hannah could barely nod, still in shock, still trying to understand what was happening. He led her to the dance floor. When he pulled her into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, she felt like she'd stepped into someone else's life. For the next 3 hours, they were a perfect, convincing lie. He never left her side. His hand always rested at the small of her back, a possessive, intimate gesture that sent shivers through her every time his fingers moved. He introduced her to dozens of people, board members, donors, Manhattan elite. "We met 6 months ago, at a coffee shop near the hospital. She spilled her latte on my white coat. When our eyes met, I knew she was the one." He whispered observations in her ear that made her laugh despite her nerves. "See that man? He owns 3 hospitals and can't tell the difference between a stent and a stapler. That woman in red? 5th husband. She collects divorces like other people collect art." Hannah found herself laughing, real laughter that echoed through the ballroom. When was the last time she'd laughed like this? She couldn't remember. They danced, and in his arms she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Security. Belonging. Even if it was all pretend. The chemistry between them was electric, undeniable. Every time their eyes met, there was a spark of recognition, as if 2 lonely people had found each other in a room full of strangers. It made no sense. They were complete strangers playing a role, but it felt dangerously real. At the end of the night outside the hotel, the cold March air shocked her back to reality. Benjamin handed her his card. Simple, elegant, just his name and phone number. "I'll be in touch." Something in his voice, something beyond the performance, made her heart skip. Then he was gone, disappearing into a waiting car, back to whatever golden world he came from. Hannah stood on the sidewalk, alone, holding his card. What the hell had just happened, and why? The question that scared her most was part of her already hoping he would call. 1 week later, Hannah was drowning. Not in water, in bills, in debt, in the crushing weight of impossible choices. She worked 70 hours a week, night shifts in the cardiac ICU, day shifts at a walk-in clinic, and it still wasn't enough. It was never enough. Her father, Joseph Collins, had suffered a massive stroke 14 months ago. One day he was a healthy bus driver. The next he was paralyzed, confined to a wheelchair, unable to speak clearly, needing round-the-clock care. The bills were staggering. Physical therapy, neurology consultations, medications insurance wouldn't cover. It never ended. That Wednesday, a new stack of bills arrived. Hannah spread them on the kitchen table after her father fell asleep. The tears came, silent, bitter tears of exhaustion and desperation. How was she supposed to do this? How does a nurse afford to save her own father? Benjamin's card sat in her purse. She looked at it sometimes, running her fingers over the embossed letters. He'd said he would be in touch, but 5 days had passed. It had probably just been a polite phrase. Rich people said things they didn't mean. Thursday afternoon, Hannah was in the middle of a chaotic ICU shift when she felt it. The silence. That particular change in the air when someone important arrives. Conversations dying, heads turning. She finished adjusting a medication drip and turned around. Dr. Benjamin Roth stood at the entrance to the cardiac ICU. He was so perfectly out of place, it was almost comical. Tailored Italian suit, expensive watch. Standing in a hospital where the cafeteria special cost $8 and came with powdered orange juice. His eyes scanned the space and landed directly on her. He walked straight to the nurse's station, where she stood frozen. "Miss Collins, I believe we have some business to discuss. Do you have a few minutes?" Hannah looked frantically at her supervisor, who was frantically waving for her to go. In the empty break room, Benjamin sat across from her at the small, coffee-stained table. "I took the liberty of investigating your situation," he began, pulling documents from a leather portfolio. Hannah's face flushed with shame and anger. "You had no right. Your father." He slid a folder across the table. "Joseph Collins, 58 years old, massive stroke 14 months ago." He paused, watching her reaction. "You're drowning, Miss Collins, working 70 hours a week and still going under." She wanted to deny it. Couldn't. The numbers on the page stared back at her like an accusation. $167,000. "I can make this disappear," he said quietly. "All of it. Today." Her breath caught. "What do you want?" 18 months. You play the role of my girlfriend. Corporate events, charity dinners, medical conferences, anywhere my presence is expected and where appearing alone is beginning to affect my professional reputation. He leaned forward slightly. "It's a job, Miss Collins. Acting. Performance. Nothing more." "And in exchange," Hannah whispered, though part of her already knew, "in exchange, I liquidate every one of your family's debts immediately. $167,000 transferred before the end of business today." He paused, letting that sink in. "Additionally, your father will be transferred to Rusk Rehabilitation Center. I'm on the advisory board. He'll be under the care of Dr. Robert Chen, the best neurologist in the country. Every test, every procedure, every therapy session he needs for the next 18 months will be covered. If he needs experimental treatment, he gets it." Hannah couldn't breathe. The hospital disappeared. Everything disappeared except his words. It was a miracle. The answer to prayers whispered at 3 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. But miracles didn't exist. There had to be a trap. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why me? You could hire an actress, a model, anyone." "Because you're pragmatic. I investigated you thoroughly over the past 4 days. You work 70 hours weekly to care for your father. You've never missed a shift. Your colleagues say you're reliable, discreet, hard-working. You graduated summa cum laude from Columbia School of Nursing, and you have clear, powerful motivation to see this contract through to its conclusion." He leaned back. "And because my last relationship taught me a valuable lesson, love is an unpredictable liability. My ex-fiancé got involved with me for love, or so she claimed. When that love turned to resentment, she nearly destroyed me with lies in her book. I won't let emotions enter my life again." He slid a sleek tablet across the table. "The contract is here. 52 pages. Read carefully." Hannah picked up the tablet with shaking hands. She scrolled through pages of legal language. Her obligations. His obligations, non-disclosure agreements, appearance schedules, expected behavior. Her throat tightened as the reality sank in. She would have to attend events, smile for cameras, pretend to be in love, live in his penthouse like a possession he'd purchased. But then she saw what he was offering, $167,000, every crushing debt erased. Today, her father in Rusk rehabilitation. Dr. Chen, the neurologist she'd only read about, the one who worked miracles treating her father. Have you ever pretended to feel something you didn't and realized you weren't pretending anymore? She kept scrolling. 30 pages, 40 pages, 45, and then she stopped breathing. Article 17, termination clause for emotional involvement. She read it once, twice, 3 times, each word sinking into her chest like a stone. If either party developed genuine romantic feelings for the other, they were contractually obligated to confess those feelings immediately, within 24 hours of recognizing them. Upon such confession, the contract would terminate instantly. All future financial benefits would cease immediately. Her father's medical care would end. Everything would stop. Previously paid debts wouldn't need to be repaid, but all future assistance would end. It was a trap, a beautiful, diabolical trap. If she fell in love with him and was honest as the contract required, she'd lose everything. If she fell in love with him and lied to keep the contract, she'd become exactly the kind of person he despised. A liar. And he'd probably discover it anyway. "This is impossible," Hannah whispered, looking up from the tablet. "You're asking me not to feel anything for 18 months while pretending to be your girlfriend. How could anyone do that?" "It's a safeguard. I don't do emotions, Hannah. They're too unpredictable. They cause chaos. These are my terms. If you can't agree, we can't proceed." He reached for the tablet as if to take it back. Hannah thought about her father, Joseph Collins, who'd worked 35 years as a bus driver without taking a single sick day, now confined to a wheelchair, depressed, with no hope of real improvement. She thought about the bills in her drawer, about working 70 hours a week and still falling behind, about the neurologist's face at the last appointment when he said without proper treatment, her father had maybe 3 years. She had no choice. She signed the contract, thinking she could control her feelings. She was wrong, and the moment she realized it, it would destroy them both. With a trembling finger, Hannah pressed the digital signature line. Her name appeared in electronic script. The word "accepted" glowed green on the screen. She'd just sold 18 months of her life. Agreed to the most dangerous game she'd ever played. A game where the price of falling in love was losing everything. Benjamin took the tablet back, verified the signature, nodded once. "Excellent. Fund transfers will be processed today. Expect a call from Rusk Rehabilitation tomorrow, arranging your father's transfer. Your first event is this Friday, a charity dinner. My assistant will contact you with details." He stood, adjusted his jacket, extended his hand formally. "Welcome aboard, Miss Collins." Hannah looked at his extended hand for a long moment. Then, because there was nothing else to do, because the decision was made, she shook it. His grip was firm, professional, but for just a moment, his fingers squeezed hers a little tighter than necessary, a little longer than appropriate. When their eyes met, there was something there neither wanted to name. Then he released her hand and walked out. Hannah stood alone in the break room, heart racing, hand tingling where he'd held it. She'd just made a deal with the devil, and he had green eyes and a surgeon's hands. The penthouse took Hannah's breath away, and not in a good way. It was beautiful, stunning even, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, furniture that probably cost more than her yearly salary. But it was cold, empty, like a museum where no one was allowed to touch anything. "Your suite is this way," Benjamin said, not looking at her. The bedroom was bigger than her entire apartment. King bed with crisp white sheets, walk-in closet, marble bathroom with a soaking tub built for 2. She turned to find him in the doorway, standing carefully outside, not entering, as if there were an invisible line he wouldn't cross. "My suite is in the West Wing," he said, voice carefully neutral. Physical distance helps maintain clarity. The word he didn't say hung in the air. Boundaries. He paused, his green eyes intense. "Remember the clause, Hannah. Article 17. At any time, if you feel you're developing emotional attachment, you have 24 hours to inform me. Honesty is not optional, it's mandatory. I have ways of verifying truth. Lie detector tests are standard for contracts of this magnitude. If you lie, I'll know. And breach of contract means you repay everything, with interest." The reminder was ice water in her face. "I understand," Hannah said, her voice neutral. He nodded and left, closing the door softly. Hannah sat on the edge of the enormous bed and looked around her beautiful, empty cage. 2 days later came her first official appearance as Benjamin Roth's girlfriend, a charity gala for the American Heart Association. The Rainbow Room, black tie. A team of stylists descended on her that morning. 3 women with trunks of designer clothes. When they finally turned her to the mirror, Hannah didn't recognize herself. The gown was navy blue silk that hugged every curve and fell in elegant waves to the floor. Real diamonds sparkled at her neck and ears, on loan from Harry Winston. When she emerged from her room, Benjamin was waiting. He was in a tuxedo, bow tie perfectly tied, every inch the powerful billionaire. He was looking at his phone, but when she entered, he looked up and stopped. For 2 seconds, maybe less, he just stared. His eyes traveled from her face to the dress and back. Something passed across his expression: surprise, admiration, desire. Then the mask returned. "Acceptable," he said. One word, delivered with the warmth of a weather report. But when he approached to escort her out, his hand came to rest at the small of her back. And Hannah felt a subtle tremor in his fingers. Just for a moment. A tension against the silk fabric. In the car, they sat in silence. Benjamin checked his phone. Hannah looked out the window. "You're going to meet a lot of people tonight. Board members, major donors, some of my colleagues. The story from the plaza still stands. We met 6 months ago at a coffee shop. Keep details vague." He finally looked at her. "And remember, you're in love with me. Deeply, completely in love. This needs to be convincing." "How?" Hannah asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "How do I pretend to be in love with someone who hired me?" Benjamin turned to face her completely. "You look at me like I'm the only person in the room. You smile when I speak. You touch my arm, my hand. Small touches couples make unconsciously. You lean in when I whisper. You laugh at my jokes." He paused. "And I'll do the same. It's not real, but it's going to look real." At the event, he was a master performer, the devoted boyfriend. His hand always on her, at her waist, her shoulder, the small of her back, possessive but gentle. He introduced her to everyone. "This is Dr. Martinez, Chief of Cardiology. This is Mrs. Ashford. Her family donated the pediatric wing. This is the mayor. He's here because elections are in 6 months." He leaned in to whisper observations that made her laugh. "That man with the bad toupee, he owns 2 hospitals and doesn't know a scalpel from a spoon. That woman has had 6 plastic surgeries. She's planning number 7. Hannah found herself laughing, real laughter that surprised them both. He touched her constantly, his hand at her back, burning through the silk, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her champagne. Each touch perfectly calibrated for their audience, but each one sending confusing shocks through her. Their performance was flawless, so convincing that even they seemed to lose themselves in it sometimes. There were moments when their eyes met and something sparked, something real and frightening and completely forbidden. They were playing a dangerous game. And in 3 days, one simple touch would change everything. The hardest moment came when Vera Roth arrived. Benjamin's mother cut through the crowd like a battleship, her sharp eyes fixed on her son. "Benjamin, you certainly are full of surprises." Her critical gaze swept over Hannah in merciless assessment. Benjamin didn't hesitate. He pulled Hannah closer, his arm wrapping around her waist in a protective, possessive gesture. "Mother, you've met my girlfriend, Hannah." He smiled, that devastating, charming smile, and pressed a soft kiss to Hannah's cheek, right beside her ear, his lips brushing the corner of her mouth. The gesture was for his mother's benefit. Public affection to silence any doubt, but his lips were warm, soft. They lingered a second longer than necessary. Hannah closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, forgetting the audience, forgetting everything except the sensation of his mouth against her skin. She felt something, a genuine, undeniable spark that shot through her entire body, and she knew he felt it too. His body tensed against hers, his breath caught before he pulled away. When their eyes met, there was confusion, alarm, recognition that something had just changed. Vera was looking between them with a thoughtful expression. "Well, you certainly look convincing." The ride home was thick with unspoken tension. They sat on opposite sides of the back seat, 2 feet of distance that might as well have been miles. Benjamin stared out the window, jaw tight. At the penthouse, they stood in the living room, city lights glowing below through the enormous windows. "You performed well tonight," Benjamin said, voice carefully controlled. He wasn't looking at her. "You too," Hannah whispered. Heavy silence fell between them, both thinking the same thing. The kiss on her cheek, the way she'd leaned into him, the look in his eyes when he'd pulled away. It had felt too real. Benjamin cleared his throat, taking a step back, physically increasing the distance. "Good night, Hannah." He turned and walked toward the West Wing. "Good night, Benjamin," she whispered to the empty room. The denial had begun. 1 week after the gala, Hannah woke up feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. Her throat was raw, her head pounded. Every muscle ached. She dismissed it. She had a full day scheduled, breakfast with the hospital auxiliary board, lunch with Benjamin's business partners, an evening fitting for next month's events. She couldn't afford to show weakness, couldn't give him any reason to question her suitability. By noon, the headache was a war drum behind her eyes. Feverish chills made her teeth chatter despite the warm spring air. The lunch was at Per Se, an exclusive restaurant where plates cost more than she used to earn in a week. Hannah sat beside Benjamin, surrounded by older men in suits discussing hospital budgets in terms she barely understood. Benjamin was in his element, commanding the conversation, citing statistics, winning arguments with ruthless logic. Occasionally his hand found hers under the table, a seemingly unconscious touch, his fingers intertwining with hers before releasing. "Performance for anyone watching?" Hannah was trying to concentrate when the room suddenly tilted. The edges of her vision darkened. The buzz of conversations became distant and muffled. She swayed in her chair, reaching for the table. And then there was a hand on her arm, strong, firm, holding her in place. Benjamin. He'd seen it instantly. In a fraction of a second, he catalogued the signs. Her pale face, the sheen of sweat on her forehead, the way her eyes weren't focusing. "Excuse us," he announced abruptly, cutting off the hospital chairman mid-sentence. His voice was a command that didn't invite discussion. "My girlfriend isn't feeling well. We're leaving." He was already standing, pulling her chair back, helping her to her feet with a firm hand on her back. She was too dizzy to protest. In the elevator, she found her voice. "I'm fine, just felt dizzy." "You didn't need to make a scene. You're not fine." He reached up and placed the back of his hand against her forehead. His touch was surprisingly gentle. "You're burning up. You have a fever." You're going home and going to bed. Now." It was an order delivered with all the authority of a doctor who wouldn't be argued with. At the penthouse, Hannah expected him to send her to her room and return to work. He didn't. He followed her, his concern palpable. "Get in bed. Change into something comfortable. I'll be right back." He left, but left the door open. Hannah changed in a feverish daze, pulling on an old Columbia t-shirt and sweatpants, the only clothes from her old life. She slid into the bed. The sheets were so soft she almost cried with relief. Benjamin returned with a tray. Digital thermometer, medication, water, a bowl of steaming soup. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. "Open," he said, holding the thermometer. When she obeyed, he slid it under her tongue with practiced ease. They waited in silence for the beep. He removed it, read the result. His expression grew somber. 102.6. It's the flu. You've been running yourself into the ground. 4 events in 1 week, plus hospital visits, plus adjusting to a new environment. Your immune system was compromised. He measured medication, made her swallow pills, held the water bottle while she drank. His movements were efficient but gentle. "You need to eat, at least half the bowl." He sat there and watched her eat soup, didn't speak, just watched with that disconcerting intensity. When she'd finished what she could, he took the bowl. "Rest now. I'll check on you in a few hours." "You don't have to do this," Hannah said, her voice sleepy. "It's not in the contract." Something passed across his face. "No, it's not, but here I am anyway." And he stayed. For the rest of the day, Benjamin cancelled all his commitments. 3 surgeries postponed, 2 board meetings rescheduled, a lecture at Columbia sent someone else to cover. He brought soup every few hours, soup his chef made from scratch with organic chicken and vegetables. He made her drink water, even when she protested. He took her temperature every 2 hours, recording the numbers on his phone. He was clinical, impersonal. But his actions spoke louder than his tone. By mid-afternoon, the fever peaked at 103.1. Hannah drifted in restless sleep, tormented by feverish nightmares. At 2 a.m., Hannah woke from a nightmare, gasping. The fever had peaked. She couldn't tell what was real. The room spun. She tried to sit up and couldn't. "Hannah," his voice low and urgent. She opened her eyes. Benjamin was there, leaning over her, one hand on her shoulder, the other checking her pulse. "You're okay. You're safe." Just a fever dream. She stared at him, this man who'd hired her, who'd built walls around his heart, who swore he'd never let anyone close. And he was here, at 2 a.m., sitting beside her bed like he'd been there for hours. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" For a moment, he looked almost frightened, as if the answer terrified him. "I don't know," he finally said. And that honest, vulnerable confession, broke something in both of them. His hand moved to her face, brushing damp hair from her forehead. His thumb traced her temple in slow, unconscious circles. It was such a simple gesture, so naturally tender, so completely instinctive. It wasn't a doctor with a patient. It wasn't a man fulfilling a contract. It was genuine care, involuntary tenderness. Neither of them breathed. Then the thermometer beeped. Benjamin seemed to realize what he was doing. He looked at his own hand as if it had betrayed him. He jerked back like he'd been burned. Horror flashed across his face, horror at himself, at what he'd almost let happen. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly. He looked at her with panic in his eyes. "Your fever's breaking," he said, voice back to that cold, professional tone. But there was roughness there now. "Keep taking the medication. Drink water." And without another word, he turned and left. His footsteps echoed down the hallway until she heard his door open and close. Hannah lay in the darkness, her skin still tingling where he'd touched her temple. He was terrified, she realized. Not of her, not of the flu, but of the undeniable truth that his own heart was betraying him. And the scariest part, she was terrified too, because she'd felt something in that touch, something dangerous and forbidden and completely out of control. Article 17 hung over them like a sword on a fraying rope. After Hannah recovered, they tiptoed around each other in painful politeness. Their conversations were brief, their interactions meticulously professional, each desperately trying to reinforce crumbling walls. But the cracks were showing. Then the explosion came from the outside world. Hannah was browsing news on her tablet when a headline stopped her heart. "The Ice King exposed. My life in hell with Dr. Benjamin Roth, explosive new memoir by Camilla Vega." Her hand started shaking before she even clicked the link. It was promotional material for a new book by Benjamin's ex-wife. But this time, Camilla had gone further, much further. The article was pure poison. Camilla painted Benjamin as an emotional monster, a sociopath who used his power and money to control and destroy. She invented stories of psychological cruelty, calculated coldness. She called him a man incapable of feeling any real human emotion, a psychopath in an expensive suit, a surgeon who can save lives but destroys souls. The comments section was brutal. Narcissist. Monster. He shouldn't be near patients. Should lose his medical license. Thousands of people who'd never met him, who knew nothing about him, were condemning him based on lies. Hannah felt white-hot anger building in her chest. It was all lies, every word. The man Camilla described didn't exist. It wasn't the man who'd stayed up all night beside her bed. It wasn't the man whose eyes had filled with warmth when he talked about saving lives. It wasn't the man who touched her temple with such unconscious tenderness. She found Benjamin in his study. The room was dark except for city lights through the window. He stood with his back to the door, a bottle of expensive scotch and a half-full glass in his hand. His posture radiated pain. "Benjamin," she said softly, "you shouldn't be here. Go to your room, Hannah." "I read the article. They're lies, all of them." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Am I? A cold man who uses contracts to manage relationships, incapable of love, sounds pretty accurate to me." "No," Hannah said fiercely. She walked up to him, took the scotch glass from his hand and set it down. "She doesn't deserve your pain. She's not worth a single moment of your suffering." He finally turned. All the armor had crumbled. There was raw pain in his eyes, humiliation. And worse, acceptance, as if he believed the terrible things she was saying. "What do you know about it? You've known me 3 months, Hannah. 3 months of pretending. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am exactly the monster she says. I know that the man she describes doesn't exist. I've seen who you really are. I saw you stay up all night beside my bed when I was sick. I saw your eyes when you talked about saving lives. I saw you care, even when you were terrified to." "No," Benjamin said, pulling his hands back, stepping away. "You can't say those things." "Why?" "Because of the contract. Because you're so terrified of feeling something that you built walls around your heart and called it protection when it's just a prison." Her fierce defense of him, her refusal to let him hide behind self-hatred, broke through his last barriers. With a low groan that came from somewhere deep in his soul, he pulled her to him. His hands framed her face, fingers tangling in her hair, and his mouth crashed down on hers. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry. A drowning man grabbing his only lifeline. Their first kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, drowning. A man who'd survived by not feeling anything, suddenly feeling everything at once. His hands shook as they framed her face. "I can't," he whispered against her lips. "The contract! Damn the contract!" Hannah breathed, pulling him back. The kiss deepened. Years of loneliness melting, walls crumbling. It was a kiss that said, "I need you, I see you, save me from myself." Hannah matched his desperation. Her arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him impossibly closer. This was real, finally, terrifyingly, beautifully real. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, breathing ragged, reality crashed down. And in the same moment, reality hit them like ice water, the contract, the clause. They'd just broken the rules. Benjamin pulled away first, stumbling backward. He looked at his hands with horror. "We just broke the rules," he said, voice hollow with shock. He walked to his desk like a robot and began typing, preparing termination documents, following his own self-destructive protocol. Hannah watched him, her heart breaking. He was really going to do it. Going to cut her out of his life, push away any chance of happiness, all because of a clause he'd written in fear. "Wait," she said, voice trembling but getting stronger. "Stop." He didn't look up. "The terms are clear. I broke the clause. The consequences are automatic." "Then you're an idiot," she said, walking up to his desk, standing directly in front of him, forcing him to look at her. When he finally raised his eyes, she saw pain so deep it was almost unbearable. "If we're going to be honest, if we're going to invoke the clause that requires truth, then let's be completely honest." She took a deep breath. "You weren't the only one who broke the contract, Benjamin. I broke it too, weeks ago. Maybe that first night at the plaza, maybe when you held my hand during the fever, maybe when you touched my face and I realized you were the most genuine person I'd ever met." She paused. "I fell in love with you. I'm in love with you." The confession hung in the air like something tangible. Benjamin stared at her, completely speechless, his entire world turning upside down. He'd prepared for every contingency except this. "So, what do we do now?" Hannah asked softly. "Do you fire me for breaking a rule you broke first, or do we admit that your perfect contract has a fatal flaw? That love doesn't follow rules, no matter how well written they are." He looked from her to his computer screen and back. Everything he believed in was crumbling, his system of control and logic falling apart, and for the first time in his adult life, the brilliant surgeon had no idea what to do. But when he looked into her eyes and saw love there, real, frightening, completely illogical love, he felt something break in his chest. Not pain, liberation. "The contract is broken," he said finally, barely above a whisper. "But maybe that's a good thing." Hannah left the penthouse that night, not in anger, in necessity. "I need space to think. I need to know if this is real outside of this bubble we built." Benjamin understood, or tried to. He'd created the impossible situation. He couldn't blame her for needing distance. She returned to her small studio in Queens. Her father was thriving at Rusk, healthier than he'd been in years, actually regaining mobility. The debts were paid. Practically, she had everything she needed. But the apartment felt hollow without him, without that constant tension, without those stolen moments of connection. Benjamin stayed alone in his glass fortress and realized that for the first time in 2 years, it felt exactly like what it was. Empty. All his perfect surgeries, all his wealth, all his control. None of it meant anything without her. 1 week later, he showed up at Manhattan Presbyterian. Hannah was in the ICU break room, drinking coffee during her break, when he walked in. When she looked up and saw him, her heart stopped. He sat down across from her without asking permission. For a long moment, he just looked at her, memorizing her face as if he hadn't seen her in years instead of days. "You were right," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I built a fortress around myself, used logic and contracts and rules to protect myself from feeling, and the only thing I accomplished was being alone." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "And then you appeared, and you brought warmth and light. You laughed at my terrible jokes, you challenged me, you made me remember I'm human." He slid something across the table. Not a contract, a first-class plane ticket with no destination filled in, no return date. You're free, the fun for your father is irrevocable. Guaranteed for his lifetime, no matter what happens between us. You don't owe me anything. You can go anywhere, be anyone, build any life you want. I'll never bother you again. His hands were trembling slightly on the table. But I hope, God, I hope that you'll choose to stay. Choose me, not because of a contract or money or obligation, but because you want to, because you love me as much as I love you. Hannah looked at the ticket, looked at the man in front of her, vulnerable in a way she never thought she'd see. The choice had always been obvious. I don't want a ticket to anywhere, she said softly. I already have my world. He's sitting in front of me. The relief that washed over his face was so profound, it looked like pain. He reached across the table and took her hands, intertwined their fingers, held her as if she were the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. I love you, Hannah. No contracts, no clauses, just truth. I love you in a way that terrifies me and makes me feel alive for the first time in years. I love you, Benjamin, she replied, tears streaming down her face. And no clause in the world can change that. The Plaza Hotel ballroom was transformed, the same place where everything had begun. But this time, everything was real. The wedding was intimate, just close friends and family. Joseph Collins sat in the front row, standing with assistants during the father-daughter dance. Vera Roth sat beside him, the two families united. When Hannah walked down the aisle, Benjamin waited for her with an expression that hid nothing. Pure, unfiltered love visible for everyone to see. Their vows were simple and honest. He promised never to hide behind contracts. She promised to always tell the truth, even when it scared her. They both promised to choose love every day, even when it was hard. Later, beside the same flowers where everything started, Benjamin pulled a folded napkin from his pocket. Our final contract, he said with a smile. She opened it. In his handwriting it read, Parties A and B agree to break the no attachment clause gladly, recklessly, and completely, every day, forever. They signed it right there, laughing like children with a secret. Binding for life, he said, pulling her into his arms. For life, she agreed. When he kissed her under the crystal chandeliers, it wasn't performance, it wasn't obligation. It was just love, gloriously complicated, completely real, and absolutely free. 6 months later, Hannah found something in Benjamin's office, a drawer she'd never opened. Inside, every version of the contract he'd written. Draft 1, Standard NDA, Professional Boundaries. Draft 2, Added financial penalties for breach. Draft 3, Added the 18-month term. Draft 4, Added Article 17. But there was a Draft 5, never used, written 3 days after he met her at the plaza. She unfolded it with shaking hands. It was blank, except for one handwritten line. Forget the contract, just ask her to stay. He'd written it, considered it, then chose fear instead, until he didn't. Hannah looked up to find Benjamin in the doorway, watching her with those green eyes. I wrote that the morning after the gala, he said softly. I was going to tear up the contract, just ask you. No terms, no conditions. Why didn't you? Because I was terrified. Terrified that without the contract you'd say no. Hannah walked to him, contract in hand, and right there in front of him she tore it in half. I would have said yes, contract or not. Then, now, always. He kissed her, and it tasted like freedom. His hand moved to rest on her slightly rounded belly where their 4-month-old baby was growing. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is break your own rules. Camila Vega's book had a short, brutal life. 2 weeks after launch, 3 of her ex-boyfriends came forward publicly with evidence of her lies. One had extensive documentation, emails, recordings, Text messages proving she'd fabricated stories about him too. The publisher pulled the book immediately. A journalistic investigation revealed 80% of her allegations were provably false. Camilla faced multiple defamation lawsuits. She lost them all. Was forced to issue a public apology and a tearful interview that went viral for all the wrong reasons. I was angry. I wanted to hurt him, but I lied about almost everything. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't a monster. I destroyed my own life trying to destroy his. Benjamin watched the interview sitting next to Hannah on their penthouse couch, her hand in his. "Do you feel anything?" Hannah asked gently. He thought for a moment. Pity, that she was so consumed by anger she destroyed herself. But mostly, gratitude. Gratitude. He turned to look at her, his green eyes full of love he no longer hid. "If she hadn't done what she did, I never would have created that impossible contract, never would have gone to that gala, never would have found you." He pulled her closer. "So, yes, gratitude, because the twisted path brought us exactly where we were supposed to be." Hannah smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "For life," she murmured. "For life," he echoed, kissing the top of her head. And this time there were no clauses, no contracts, no conditions, just love, free, real, and eternal. If you believe that true love can break even the most impossible rules, leave your comment below. Which moment moved you the most? Was it when they signed the contract knowing they'd eventually break it, when he cared for her during the fever, the desperate kiss after the article? Or when she discovered Draft 5, the contract he almost wrote that said, "Just ask her to stay"? We want to know your opinion. And if this is your first time here at Secret Billionaire Romance, welcome to the family. Subscribe right now because every week we bring stories that will make your heart race and believe in love again. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new story. Thank you for being here, for believing in love stories that remind us that the heart doesn't follow rules. It makes its own. See you in the next story.